Cecilia Nina Cavendish-Bentinck was born on September 11, 1862, into an aristocratic yet intriguing family lineage. She first drew breath at 50 Eaton Place in Belgravia, London, a prestigious address befitting her heritage. Cecilia was the eldest daughter of Reverend Charles Cavendish-Bentinck and his wife Louisa, née Burnaby. Through her father, she was a granddaughter of former Prime Minister William Cavendish-Bentinck, the 3rd Duke of Portland, linking Cecilia to one of Britain's great ducal families. Her mother Louisa came from the wealthy Burnaby family of Belgravia, ensuring that Cecilia grew up with both noble blood and substantial social standing. The family's status placed them firmly within the upper reaches of Victorian society, part of the British landed aristocracy, if not themselves titled at the time. Cecilia's early childhood, however, was marked by both privilege and sorrow. She was just a toddler when her father, Reverend Charles Cavendish-Bentinck, died in 1865 at the age of 47. Cecilia, not yet 3, and her younger twin sisters, Anne Violet and Hyacinth, born in 1864, were left fatherless in an era when paternal guidance was paramount. In 1870, her widowed mother, Caroline Louisa, remarried, taking as her second husband a respected aristocratic gentleman, Harry Warren Scott. After this union, young Cecilia and her sisters divided their upbringing between an elegant country estate and a London townhome. They spent formative years at Forbes House in Ham, in the leafy outskirts of London, and at the family's residence at 45 Grosvenor Place, in the heart of the capital. Surrounded by comfort and doted on by their mother and stepfather, the Cavendish-Bentinck girls received a refined upbringing typical of well-connected Victorian ladies, including home education and exposure to high society. Cecilia in particular grew into an outgoing, sociable young woman known for her charm and accomplishments. By the late 1870s, as she approached adulthood, she was prepared to come out into society as a debutante, a necessary step for an aristocratic young lady in search of a suitable husband. Behind the polished facade of Cecilia's aristocratic upbringing lay a family history rife with romantic scandal. Decades before Cecilia's debut, the Cavendish-Bentinck name had already been splashed in society gossip. Her own father, Reverend Charles Cavendish-Bentinck, had been at the centre of a sensational love affair that defied Victorian norms. In 1839, long before he became a respectable clergyman, Charles shocked his illustrious family by secretly marrying Sinetta Julia Sine Lambourne, a young woman of gypsy origin. This clandestine marriage across class and social lines caused an uproar within the Cavendish-Bentinck clan. Charles's patron and uncle, the 4th Duke of Portland, was reportedly outraged when the secret union came to light. The Duke promptly cut off Charles's allowance and any prospects of inheritance, effectively casting him out for his transgression of class boundaries. Love in this case collided head-on with Victorian notions of propriety. Wealth, titles, and respectability mattered more to the family than matters of the heart. Tragically, Charles's first great love did not enjoy a happy ending. Sinetta Lambourne died young in 1850 at just 29 years old, leaving Charles heartbroken and without any surviving children from their union. Only after Sinetta's untimely death did the Cavendish-Bentinck family tentatively welcome Charles back into the fold. 9 years later, in 1859, he made a far more conventional match by marrying Cecilia's mother, Louisa Caroline Burnaby. Louisa came from a very wealthy and highly respected family, and this alliance effectively rehabilitated Charles's reputation in society. What had been whispered about as a scandal was quietly swept under the rug. In the eyes of polite society, all was forgiven and forgotten once Charles settled down with an acceptable bride, a stark example of Victorian hypocrisy. From this second, respectable marriage came Cecilia and her siblings. These dramatic events occurred before Cecilia was born, but they formed a key part of her family's story, one she surely learned of as she grew older. The legacy of these irregular love matches likely lived on in family lore. Cecilia's paternal grandfather, Lord Charles Bentinck, himself a son of the 3rd Duke of Portland, had also caused a scandal in Regency times by eloping with a married woman, the Duke of Wellington's niece, in 1815. This pattern of passionate, rule-breaking romances in 2 successive generations of the Cavendish-Bentinks was later documented in an aptly titled book, A Right Royal Scandal, highlighting how these unconventional unions would alter the course of history. Indeed, if not for a young gypsy girl's tragic fate, the British monarchy might look very different today. Without Sinetta's early death, Charles would never have wed Louisa Burnaby, and Cecilia herself would not have been born, erasing the future Queen Mother and Queen Elizabeth II from the royal lineage. Thus, Cecilia's very existence, and her place as grandmother of a queen, hung on a twist of fate born from scandal and romance. By the time Cecilia reached young womanhood around 1880, any whispers of her father's youthful indiscretions had long subsided. She entered the marriage market as an attractive prospect, well-bred, well-connected, and by all accounts personable and accomplished. In 1881, at the age of 18, Cecilia Cavendish-Bentinck's own romantic destiny unfolded. She married Claude George Bowes-Lyon, Lord Glamis, on July 16, 1881, at St. Peter's Church, Petersham, in Surrey. Claude Bowes-Lyon was 26 years old, and the heir to the Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn, a noble Scottish title. Their match was an excellent one for the era, uniting Cecilia's distinguished bloodline with one of Scotland's grand landowning families, and it appears to have been made with the full blessings of both families. On their wedding day, the normally quiet village of Petersham bloomed with celebration. The ceremony was conducted by special licence, allowing the wedding without the usual public bans, and attracted considerable attention. The quaint old church was beautifully decorated with lilies and fragrant flowers, and it filled to capacity with those eager to witness the union. In a touch of pageantry, officers of Lord Glamis's regiment, the 2nd Life Guards, lined the aisle in their dress uniforms as an honour guard. The bride, known to family and friends as Nina, arrived escorted by her stepfather, Mr. Harry Scott, who gave her away in place of her late father. Cecilia was radiant in an ivory satin gown trimmed with old lace, wearing a wreath of fresh orange blossoms in her hair beneath a flowing tulle veil. 8 young bridesmaids, including Cecilia's sisters Violet and Hyacinth Cavendish-Bentinck, and several of the groom's sisters and cousins, attended her in charming white dresses and chip hats with ostrich feathers. It was a picture-perfect society wedding of the age, combining military splendour, aristocratic tradition, and youthful romance. After the vows were exchanged, cheers erupted as Lord and Lady Glamis departed the church. Villagers threw flowers in the path of the newlyweds' carriage as it rolled away. A lavish reception followed at Forbes House, Ham Common, the home of Cecilia's mother and stepfather, where more than 160 guests were served lunch in a grand marquee on the lawn. The 6th Duke of Portland, Cecilia's illustrious relative and head of her paternal family, proposed a toast to the health, happiness and prosperity of the bride and groom. This gesture symbolised the full embrace of the union by both families. Any past tensions were firmly set aside as the Duke himself led well-wishers in celebrating the match. Lord Glamis responded with heartfelt thanks on behalf of himself and his new wife. By mid-afternoon, the young couple set off for their honeymoon at St. Paul's Waldenbury, the Strathmore family's English estate in Hertfordshire. Cecilia's travelling dress, a smart ecru nun's cloth ensemble with matching lace hat, was noted in the papers, as were the numerous wedding gifts the popular pair received. While their marriage was eminently suitable, one gets the sense that it was also warm and loving. In Victorian aristocratic circles, not every union was a love match, but Cecilia and Claude Bowes-Lyon appear to have genuinely cared for each other. No evidence suggests Cecilia had any serious romantic entanglements or scandals of her own prior to meeting Lord Glamis. Unlike her father and grandfather, she did not shock society with any unsuitable courtships. Instead, her name in the society pages was only ever linked honourably with Claude. Both were from the same social world, even born in the same upscale London district. Interestingly, Claude had also been born in Belgravia in 1855. They likely met through mutual connections. Claude was educated at Eton and served as an officer in the household cavalry, moving in elite circles where Cecilia's family connections would overlap. At the time of their engagement, Claude was a dashing young lord and cavalry lieutenant, and Cecilia a graceful debutante from a prominent family. It was, by all appearances, a successful match of affection and alliance, the kind of match that Victorian aristocrats hoped for their children. After the joyous fanfare of the wedding, Cecilia settled into her new life as Lady Glamis, unaware that she was embarking on a journey that would one day place her at the nexus of British royal history. In 1904, 2 decades after their marriage, Cecilia's husband inherited the earldom and became the 14th Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn. Cecilia herself, previously Lady Glamis, now assumed the grand title of Countess of Strathmore and Kinghorn. With the title came vast estates and responsibilities. The Bowes-Lyon family domains included at least 2 magnificent country houses, Glamis Castle in Angus, Scotland, the ancestral seat, and St Paul's Waldenbury in Hertfordshire, England. In time, they would also inherit properties like Gibbside and Streatham Castle in the north of England. As Countess, Cecilia became the chatelaine of these estates, overseeing large households and many tenants. She rose to the task with vigour and exemplary skill. Contemporaries described Cecilia as a gregarious and accomplished hostess, renowned for presiding over her households with meticulous care. She was an exceptionally talented pianist, and music often filled the halls of her homes when she entertained. Guests to Glamis Castle or St Paul's Waldenbury could expect warm hospitality, refined cuisine, and the gentle, unpretentious charm of their hostess. Indeed, Cecilia ran her houses with a practical, down-to-earth approach, despite the grandeur around her. She even lent her own creative touch to the grounds of Glamis. It was Lady Strathmore who personally designed the Italian garden on the castle grounds, a testament to her love of horticulture and landscape design. Despite her aristocratic rank, Cecilia's style of motherhood and domestic life was notably hands-on and somewhat unconventional for the times. In an era when ladies of her class typically relegated child-rearing to nannies and wet nurses, Lady Cecilia breastfed her own babies, a surprisingly intimate and maternal choice that earned comment in society. She was devoted to her children and took an active role in their upbringing. It's recorded that she personally taught her younger children the basics of reading, writing, and even painting. The image of a countess on the floor with her toddlers, guiding their first letters of the alphabet or holding a paintbrush with them, contrasts with the distant parenting style common in high society at the time. But Cecilia was determined to instill strong values and education in her brood. Deeply religious and very family-oriented, she preferred a quiet domestic life to the endless whirl of London's social seasons. Her letters and notes, where they survive, reveal a woman who found contentment in simple family pleasures, gardening, embroidery, music, and who placed her duties as a mother above any social ambitions. And there was no shortage of motherly duties, for Cecilia and Claude would have a very large family. Over the span of 20 years, the Countess gave birth to 10 children, a remarkable number even by the standards of the prolific Victorian Edwardian aristocracy. Their first child, Violet, was born in 1882, just 9 months after the wedding, and their last, little Elizabeth, arrived in 1900, a treasured late-life baby born when Cecilia was 38. Managing this growing household became one of Cecilia's full-time occupations. The children were raised between the idyllic Scottish countryside of Glamis and the gentler climes of St Paul's Walden-Bury in England. Family life was lively and often bustling with children's laughter in the nurseries and gardens. Cecilia, with her strong nurturing instinct, was at the heart of it all, from organising lessons and play to comforting fevers and scraped knees. Her religion, she was a devout Anglican of high church leanings, much like her mother, provided a moral framework for the family. Sunday services and prayers were a regular part of the household routine. The Countess's personal faith and quiet piety were well known. She was described as deeply religious and a very private person, one who valued virtue and reserve. These qualities she endeavoured to pass on to her sons and daughters. Life as the Strathmore matriarch, however, was not without heartache. Of the 10 Bowes-Lyon children, not all would survive to adulthood, a painful reality that Cecilia bore with stoic dignity. Her firstborn, Violet, a sweet girl remembered for her hyacinth blue eyes, tragically died from diphtheria at age 11 in 1893. It was a crushing loss for Cecilia to lay her little Violet to rest in the family plot at St Andrew's Church, Ham. A decade later, another blow struck when Alexander, one of her twin boys, died in 1911 at just 24. The cause was reportedly tumorous disease. Through each loss, Cecilia leaned on her faith and her love for her remaining children to carry on. She never flaunted her grief publicly. The stiff upper lip ethos of her class dictated composure. But friends noted the sorrow in her eyes that never fully left. Still, many joys graced Cecilia's married life. She found great pride in her children's accomplishments. Her second daughter Mary married into nobility, becoming Lady Elphinstone, and her sons, Patrick and David, would shoulder family responsibilities in due time. Patrick succeeded as the 15th Earl. The younger set of children, Rose, Michael, Elizabeth and David, grew up especially close to their mother in the tranquil years just before World War I, benefiting from the Countess's personal attention to their schooling and moral upbringing. Family photographs from the era show Lady Strathmore surrounded by healthy, smiling children in the gardens of Glamis, a testament to the loving home she cultivated. By all accounts, Cecilia excelled in her role as Countess. She was not a flamboyant society dame, but rather a model of duty, charity, and kindness. The Strathmores were significant landowners in Scotland and England, and Cecilia took seriously the Victorian aristocratic ideal of noblesse oblige. She was kind to the estate tenants and staff, often visiting the sick and elderly on their lands with small gifts or practical assistance. Her son-in-law later remarked that she and her husband were unusually compassionate landlords for their era. Indeed, visitors might mistake the Earl, in his old tweed Mackintosh coat tied with twine, for a common farmer working the fields, a humility that matched Cecilia's own unpretentious nature. In the opulent world of nobility, the Strathmore household stood out for its genuine warmth and lack of pretension. Lady Strathmore's preference for a quiet life meant that, outside of necessary social duties, she spent much of her time in the countryside, immersed in the rhythm of family and seasonal estate life. Those peaceful years, however, would soon be interrupted by the tumult of the 20th century. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 brought profound changes and trials to Cecilia's life. With 4 sons of military age, she had to endure the anxiety of seeing them off to war. Patrick, John, Michael, and Fergus Bowes-Lyon all served in the British Army during the Great War. The conflict also transformed the Strathmore estates into part of the home front. At Cecilia's initiative, Glamis Castle was converted into a convalescent hospital for wounded soldiers. The grand rooms that once hosted balls and family gatherings now held rows of cots for recovering troops. Lady Strathmore rolled up her sleeves and took an active role in this wartime effort, organising medical supplies, tending to injured young men, and writing letters to their families for them. Witnesses recall her moving through the improvised wards with a calming smile and words of comfort, exemplifying the spirit of so many aristocratic women who turned their privilege towards the national cause. She continued this exhausting volunteer work until illness struck her own body. During the war, she developed cancer, likely uterine cancer, and was forced to retreat from active service due to declining health. Worse was yet to come. In the bleak autumn of 1915, Cecilia received news that every wartime mother dreads. Her beloved fourth son, Captain Fergus Bowes-Lyon, was killed in action on September 26, 1915, during the Battle of Loos in France. Fergus was only 26 years old. He fell leading his men in a valiant attack on the German lines at the Hohenzollern redoubt, and his loss devastated the family. Cecilia mourned him deeply. It was said that her hair turned considerably greyer after Fergus's death, and she kept his portrait and military honours close by for the rest of her life. Another son, Lieutenant John Bowes-Lyon, was wounded and gassed during the war. Although John survived the conflict, his health was weakened, and he would die relatively young in 1930. Through these trials, Cecilia showed the stoic endurance expected of her station, but those who knew her best understood the heavy toll the war took on her heart. Amidst war and worry, Cecilia also battled her own health challenges. In October 1921, just a few years after the war, she underwent a major surgery, a hysterectomy, to treat her illness, likely the cancer diagnosed earlier. The operation required a long recovery, and the Countess spent much of 1921 to 1922 convalescing. Fortunately, the surgery appeared to halt the progression of her disease, and by May 1922, she was on the mend. Her family rejoiced at her recovery. Ever devoted, Cecilia bounced back to participate in family celebrations as soon as she was able. In January 1923, barely a year after regaining her health, she was toasting an engagement in the family, that of her youngest daughter, Elizabeth, who had just accepted a proposal of marriage from a most distinguished suitor. Lady Cecilia's quiet life took a dramatic turn when her baby, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, fell in love with and became engaged to Prince Albert, Duke of York, the second son of King George V. The engagement, announced in early 1923, was cause for great joy in the Strathmore household. Cecilia had always doted on Elizabeth, born in 1900 as her ninth child and fourth daughter, and often called her Buffy within the family. Now this cherished daughter was about to enter the royal family. Elizabeth's wedding in April 1923 at Westminster Abbey was a national event. A commoner, albeit an earl's daughter, marrying a prince of the blood. Cecilia and Claude stood proudly by as their 22-year-old daughter walked down the aisle to marry Prince Albert, Bertie to his family, and the future King George VI. A famous photograph from that day shows King George V and Queen Mary flanked by the newlywed Duke and Duchess of York, with the Earl and Countess of Strathmore standing off to the side. In it, Cecilia, now in her early 60s, appears dignified and slightly shy, watching her daughter's royal ascension with a mix of pride and perhaps protective concern. This marriage brought Cecilia into the orbit of the British royal family in a way she could never have imagined in her youth. The country girl who loved gardening at Glamis suddenly found herself the mother-in-law of a prince, dining at Buckingham Palace and being courtesied to by lesser aristocracy due to her new royal connections. True to form, Cecilia remained unpretentious through it all. She reportedly remarked that becoming a royal mother-in-law was something of a strain for one who preferred the quiet of the country, but she handled it with grace and humour. In 1923, upon the wedding of Elizabeth and Albert, King George V conferred on Cecilia's husband the honour of Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, GCVO, and Cecilia herself would later be appointed a Dame Grand Cross of the Order, GCVO, in 1937, marking her contribution to the royal family. Yet for all the honours, Lady Strathmore did not seek the limelight. She was content to support her daughter and son-in-law privately. When their first child, Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth II, was born in April 1926, it was in Cecilia's London townhouse at 17 Bruton Street, a reflection of how closely intertwined the families had become. Cecilia was present for the birth of her royal granddaughter and was chosen as one of little Princess Elizabeth's godmothers, an intimate honour that spoke to the affection and trust between the Strathmores and the royal family. If the royal marriage of her daughter threatened Cecilia's preference for seclusion, an even bigger upheaval came in late 1936. In December of that year, after the dramatic abdication of King Edward VIII, Prince Albert unexpectedly became King George VI, and Cecilia's beloved Lizzie became Queen Consort of the United Kingdom. The Countess of Strathmore was now the Queen's mother. This was an unprecedented situation. Never before had a British monarch's mother been a non-royal subject living outside the immediate royal circle. The press and public showed keen interest in Cecilia, but she characteristically shunned any attempt to turn her into a celebrity. During the abdication crisis of 1936, as reporters clamoured for comments or photos of the Queen's family, Lady Strathmore famously quipped, "I shouldn't waste a photograph on me." In her wry way, she deflected attention from herself, implying that focus should remain on the King and Queen. This humble remark was widely reported and only endeared her more to the British people. They saw in her the same qualities they adored in her daughter: warmth, modesty, and down-to-earth charm. At the coronation of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth in May 1937, Cecilia occupied a seat of honour in Westminster Abbey's royal box, a remarkable place for one born a commoner. Dressed in peeress's robes and a glittering family tiara, the 74-year-old countess watched her daughter crowned queen. It was a moment of immense pride. Observers noted that Cecilia had tears in her eyes during the ceremony, perhaps recalling in that splendid moment the improbable chain of events that led her family, the once scandalous Cavendish-Bentincks and the country earls of Strathmore, into the heart of the monarchy. She remained composed, however, and later joined the royal family on the Buckingham Palace balcony appearance, standing modestly at the back. Photographs from Coronation Day show Cecilia Bowes-Lyon beaming quietly behind her royal daughter and son-in-law, a diamond-fringed tiara adorning her silver hair. Yet even amid pomp, Cecilia never lost perspective. She saw herself as a supportive figure, not the focus, a duty she fulfilled perfectly. As one society commentator put it at the time, Lady Strathmore has the unique distinction of being royal without ever having sought royalty. She remains as she ever was, a kindly, sensible great lady of the old school. The final chapter of Cecilia's life was filled with as much joy and sorrow as the years before. Now well into her 70s, her health was becoming fragile. In April 1938, the Strathmore family gathered for yet another happy occasion, the wedding of Cecilia's granddaughter Anne Bowes-Lyon, one of the children of Cecilia's son John, to Viscount Anson. The wedding took place on April 28, 1938, and despite feeling unwell, the Countess of Strathmore was determined to attend. During the celebrations, however, she suffered a heart attack. The family rushed to her side as she was taken back to her London residence at 38 Cumberland Mansions in Marylebone. There, over the next several weeks, Cecilia was tended by doctors and loved ones. Her condition initially stabilised, giving hope she might recover. Queen Elizabeth, her daughter, visited whenever her royal duties allowed, deeply concerned for her mother's well-being. But after 8 weeks of decline, Cecilia Bowes-Lyon passed away on June 23, 1938, at the age of 75. Her death came quietly, with family at her bedside. She had outlived 4 of her 10 children, Violet, Alexander, Fergus, and John, a fact that she often noted with sadness in her later years. The nation took sympathetic notice of the passing of the Queen's mother. Though not a royal herself, Lady Strathmore's position as the maternal grandmother of the presumptive future Queen, Princess Elizabeth, gave her a special place in the public's heart. Moreover, many remembered the gracious old Countess from the coronation and her humble quips during the abdication. She was eulogized in the press as the grandmother of the nation's princesses, emphasizing how her legacy now lived on in Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and in the young princesses, Elizabeth and Margaret. Cecilia was laid to rest on June 27, 1938, on the grounds of her beloved Glamis Castle, where she had spent some of the happiest days of her life. A simple funeral service was held in Scotland. King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, despite the demands of their royal position, travelled north to attend the burial of the Queen's mother. Mourners from the local villages lined the route to the castle, paying respects as the cortege passed, a poignant testament to the esteem in which Lady Strathmore was held by those who knew her. In the centuries-old family vault at Glamis, she joined generations of Bowes-Lyon ancestors, including the ones she knew and loved and even those whose tales she had inherited.